The history of human progress is the history of technological progress. And outside of a couple incidents, most of the marks that we celebrate in history, that we demarcate better from bad, are inventions of technologies and tools.
The promise of AI is real. So is the challenge of making it work in your organization. Welcome to The Path Forward, where we explore the future of work in the age of AI. I'm pleased to be joined today by Zack Kass and Michael Atalla. Gents, how you doing?
Thanks for having us, man.
I'm glad you guys are here.
Super good to be here. Perfect day in Seattle.
It is. It's a beautiful day. All right, let's get right into it. So, Zack, your book frames AI as the next renaissance. What do you mean by that?
Well, the argument the book makes is actually that the history of human progress is the history of technological progress. And outside of a couple incidents, most of the marks that we celebrate in history, that we demarcate better from bad, are inventions of technologies and tools that enable us to do more. And the principal argument in the book is that technology, as a story of human progress, continues to get told and is going to be told by AI, but not strictly by AI, that AI will be a catalyst for a bunch of other change. And I chose the Renaissance somewhat tongue-in-cheek because it, as you noticed, works really well with the AI, but also because for a lot of people, especially amidst a lot of cynicism and fatalism that we experience right now globally, the late Middle Ages was a particularly dark time. And so if you really want to draw people's attention to a comparison point, you remind them that the time before one of the great leaps in modern history was marked by the decimation of half the population, no real tool invention for about 400 years, and widespread sort of feudalism and oppression, which was obviously way worse than the world we live in today, and then sort of gave forth this much better time. So my argument is actually just that whatever we think we're in right now, we have very little humility for the world we came from, and we have even less for the world we move towards, but that technology actually just continues to tell a pretty remarkable story of the ways in which humans can live more fulfilling lives.
I love that.
Cool. Yeah, we don't have it that bad, and look at this. Look what we've got ahead of us.
It is remarkably hard for any individual to think about the lives their grandparents led. We remember a past that was far better than it actually was, or we tell stories of a past romantically. And we do that, and then we also do this other thing, this negative projection, this forward-looking, almost fatalism. It's bad, and it's going to get worse. And you actually have to sit with people, often individually, to pick apart why they think these things. And some of it is a trend line, and some of it actually turns out is just a bunch of luxury beliefs. If your world is so good that you can sit around and think a lot, then you're actually doing something that your ancestors very rarely did, and inherently your mind plays tricks on you in ways that human biology actually didn't really account for. That requires a bunch of work. Like, you actually have to spend time with people one-on-one around dining room tables to pick apart why they actually don't think the world is getting better, or why they actually don't observe how good it is. And I actually do that with the leaders. Like, I sit with leaders of large companies to remind them that if they think the world is getting worse, there's no way their people are going to be motivated. It is so hard to say, we're going to automate things to the hilt and it's going to be great, if you don't actually believe that. So you have to, at some point, pick apart your own ideas such that you can tell stories about a future that people you are leading will want to charge to.
I want to get at that idea of misconceptions, because I think you touched on something really interesting there. So what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to AI, especially in like a corporate setting?
I think right now people are grossly overestimating the economic detriment of AI and grossly underestimating the emotional one. So October 1st, 2024, the longshoremen go on strike. I don't know if you remember this. The dock workers of America walk off the eastern seaboard. And on the morning of October 2nd, the head of the longshoremen union, Harold Daggett, goes on CNN and gives this very long, pretty powerful interview. And he opens the interview by pointing at the camera. And he says to the camera, he says, "The American people have no idea how dangerous I am. I will cripple you." This is how he introduces himself. He's the second most powerful man in the supply chain economy. What did he want? What were his demands? Well, they weren't more money, and they weren't safer working conditions, which are the two demands of every labor union since we organized labor. The demand was that the ports not automate their jobs. And so I sent him a very long, very thoughtful email because I was fascinated, and he sent me something very different back. And he didn't want to meet with me, but we went to the ports and we met with a bunch of these guys. I met with guys in Miami and in Jersey, and we interviewed, it's 95% male union. We interviewed 25 men, asked them a battery of questions, of which 4 told us everything I thought I needed to understand about automation and labor. What's the most important part of your job? 92% ranked community 1 or 2. Not an economic issue. So I asked each of them, I said, your picket signs, they had 2. Your picket signs read, robots don't pay taxes and automation harms families. If automation harms families, who does automation benefit? And then I've reframed it. I said, in this case, who benefits economically if we automate the ports? And some of them didn't like the tone of my voice and didn't like where the question was leading, but almost all of them got it. And some of them were willing to answer. And the answer obviously is everyone. Everyone benefits economically if we automate the ports, including eventually the longshoremen and their kids. And the only reason I know that is we are all descendants, everyone in this room and everyone basically in the city or on Earth, we're all descendants of people whose jobs were automated to our economic benefit collectively, and we never think twice about them. If we actually automate everything to the hilt, and I think we will continue to work will just change quite a bit. And very frequently, I think the biggest misconception that we keep asking is, are we going to be poor instead of are we going to be happy? Can man find meaning outside of work? And I think the answer is yes, but on what time scale? Yeah. And we should talk about this as the actual risk, because pretty clearly we keep pointing at this red herring that's totally distracting us from the issue that I think most companies now need to start considering addressing.
UiPath has the opportunity to put this technology to work for good or for better, whatever it is. How do you think about the responsibility that companies like UiPath have in the context of that argument? Like, I'm curious, like, how do you think about technology? You were spent a meaningful amount of time at OpenAI, a company that's been hugely influential in this moment in time. What is our shared responsibility for that motivation to make people happy?
I have a very, maybe strangely hot take on the matter. I think your technology should be as good as possible. You should try to automate as much as possible.
I'm really struck by that because you did an interview with McKinsey when you were on your book tour, and you talked about this idea of AI as not necessarily to sort of paraphrase, not a technological responsibility, but almost like a political responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I think you're really touching on that. And you also talked about this idea of like, it's job displacement, not job replacement. Can you talk a little bit about sort of like how should we be thinking about, like, so to Michael's question about, like, there are companies who are building technology. That technology is meant to automate all these things that slow us down, that make us inefficient, whatever. But a lot of times what that winds up being people saying, oh, my job's going to go away. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about sort of like the mentality of like displacement versus replacement.
Well, first, most of the jobs in the Western world today were unimaginable 100 years ago. And a lot of the jobs didn't even have a title 30 years ago. And we continue somehow to believe that this time is going to be different. And no, now the jobs are actually going away. And I continue to wonder how people arrive there for 3 reasons. Actually, there are 4. The first reason that making any sense of the labor economy vis-a-vis AI is really hard is that technologists have no understanding of macroeconomics, and macroeconomists have no idea how AI works. And so you really have these 2 bodies trying to make sense of each other without a shared understanding. And there are a few exceptions, like Eric Brynjolfsson at Stanford, who has the humility to be like, I don't really know. I think we're going to get more jobs. It's going to be wonky. The second reason is political protection. Everyone goes, oh, engineers are going to automate first. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. But you're not right because Claude Code is really good. You're right because the software engineers never organized their labor. They have no union. And they're not particularly politically well liked. It's a bunch of people who make an enormous amount of money, who live in, pockets of coastal elite areas, who, to the average person in the United States, doesn't need more favor. And so no politician is going to drag a software engineer in front of Congress and say, we can never take Mike's job. He makes $500,000 a year. What will he do? So the lack of political protection is actually the safest reason why you could see these jobs automating. And even then, I don't think we will. And the current economic forecast says otherwise. The third, new work. We have no understanding of how AI is going to change the nature of work. I personally think there's going to be a massive new physical services economy. There's just going to be a bunch more stuff built. Jevons paradox, which Aaron Levy argues about all the time on LinkedIn and has sort of died on that hill pretty effectively, says that we're actually going to want a bunch more software engineers because the cost of software is going to go down. But the fourth, I do think, is the most important, which is we keep talking about this future of work issue as though the kids are really obsessed with their job. They're not. They're not actually. Parents are obsessed with their kid's job because they want their kid to have status. Kids are obsessed with living a life that's better than their parents. They are obsessed with the idea that they will have what their parents have and then some, which has been promised for about 700 years. And the way you solve that happens in Congress. You make housing, healthcare, and education less expensive. And I come back to this as often as possible so that people remember that if you solve those things, you actually solve the future of living, which matters way more than the future of work, because you can create the perfect job. But if a kid's got to work till they're 90 to afford their parents' house, what difference does it make? They're going to riot.
In the context of everything we're talking about right now, it almost seems, it can seem rather small to be thinking about the transformation of work in the context of what you're talking about, which I think is incredibly important. The transformation of humanity, the way AI will affect the world, the political dynamics that you're describing, incredibly important. But I do think buried in all that is the fact that we are living through an era where we are changing work yet again. I mean, you point out, I think correctly, that it's not the first time. In fact, if we take automation alone, we could go back hundreds, if not thousands of years and talk about the impact that automation has had to positively move the world forward, move civilization forward, move the product of the economy forward. I think we're there now with AI. I think what UiPath is endeavoring to do is really find those pathways to change the dynamics of individual roles, individual work, individual industries in ways that I think will transform, the way work gets done in each of those discrete places. And I think those discrete places are the interesting, places for true transformation inside a business, like the handoffs between organizations, the handoffs between businesses, the way that one person's role might be changed into something that is either easier, better, faster, and the way that easier, better, faster connects to easier, better, faster on the other side of a table, and suddenly two easier, better, fasters are easier, better, faster together. I think those are the types of discrete workforce transformation moments that are happening day to day, week to week right now, that our technology is about changing. And I actually think that you were correctly pointing out that both things can happen. Both things can be true. We can build the best possible technology to really transform the workforce in a way that is positive and impactful, a better outcome for people. And in doing that, we will see new jobs emerge. We'll see new roles take shape. We'll see new businesses start. And at the same time, we have to solve the real hard problems, what is happening in the world beyond the scope of technology alone.
I don't know that you need to. Do you feel a call to, what do you think UiPath's role is in that?
In the second thing?
Yeah.
Look, I happen to believe that tech, this is me speaking personally, I happen to believe that tech is accountable for a bunch of what you highlight as challenges to take on in the world, whether it's wealth disparity, whether it's political imbalance in the world. And I feel a sense of accountability as a participant in the tech industry to actually take the affluence and power and capabilities that we have to affect the world for good. I think that UiPath shares that in some ways, shapes, or form. I mean, we have a foundation that we've formed, the UiPath Foundation, that is about drawing kids in the primary school and secondary school that live in rural Romania out of places where they'd never, ever find the kind of opportunity that UiPath employees enjoy, even in Romania. And we want to draw them out and show them that opportunity. I think companies like us should find ways to invest in the world at large in that way. You talked a lot about some realities that are true, the true here in the United States. I think that there is some version of that in every country in the world. Some of it is global. I do think we have an accountability, I think, and we should take it seriously. I don't know, that's the way I...
No, I appreciate that. I also really, really admire private sector leaders who donate money and create foundations to support people who are in need. I still continue to come back to this idea that for most private sector, the most effective thing that you can do to move the world forward is to invent new things and diffuse the technology to the benefit of the average person.
Both can be true.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about how much AI there is. But for organizations who are swimming in tools and swimming in pilots, what should they be looking at? What should they be considering when they're thinking about how they're putting all these things into practice?
Look, to be successful in the world today, in the context of AI, we have to accept first and foremost that this is an all industry moment. This is an ecosystem moment. This isn't a moment for us to take the particular stack that we own and jam on innovating with zero consideration of what's happening around us. If I am sitting in a customer seat today, and I'm a customer of my own technology at the end of the day, the most important thing for me is to have a set of technology players that understand that participation in that ecosystem, willingness to participate in the ecosystem enthusiastically, seek out the alliances, the partnerships, the technical integrations, the horizontal view of what the AI model will be best, what cloud platform will be best. Those decisions are the ones that will actually serve us collectively best and will actually, I think, result in the kind of outcome, the positive outcomes that Zack's discussion earlier will take us. So that's a role that UiPath enthusiastically plays in the industry today, and will continue to be an anchor for how we participate in the ecosystem.
Yeah. What about you, Zack?
There are basically 4 reasons why companies are either mired in tools or stuck in pilot purgatory, or worse, just doing nothing at all and not learning about any of it. The first is that most people have no idea how powerful this technology is. And some of this I actually blame ChatGPT on. It's actually quite remarkable. The myopia that is caused by the device itself, by the product, is this weird, it's counterintuitive, but the more people do things on the app, the harder it is for them to imagine the ways in which this is sort of magical outside of the app. And so they stare at this thing and go, oh, that's what it's capable of. No, that's what you can see. And actually, it's kind of like when people first saw Edison turn on a light bulb, like we might have been standing there and been like, wow, that's electricity. Mm-hmm. And Edison would have been like, well, that's a light bulb powered by electricity. The second reason, and this is super important, is that most people are actually pretty terrified of the notion of automating their own job. And I think that this is an emotional reaction, not actually an economic one. There are 2 reasons for this. One is that they love their work or they attach identity to their work. The other is that they are afraid that their boss will find out they're not necessary and they will fire them. The third reason is that people don't actually have any idea of what the business wants to accomplish. This is continues to be this pattern that I see. There is no clear castle on the hill. So there's no intrinsic value or motivation in an average employee inside of an average company to do more effective work. They're like, well, it doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't show up on my bottom line.
What I like about you're tackling such enormously important challenges, and you're in what you're talking about right now. But if you break it down, what I like about it is there are some things underneath that are entirely achievable, entirely attainable. There are the challenge that the average worker isn't heavily invested in the company's results is not a new problem. If we can break down challenges like you're describing into those component parts, and you described them just now, that are certainly things we can take on individually, I think that's the opportunity we have to.
Do you have kids?
I do, yes.
How old?
17, 13.
Amazing. You have kids?
Yeah, 16 and 14.
Okay, so I have a 7-month-old, so you're a little ahead of me. But
Okay,
you're in the
totally.
throes. People ask me, what are you going to want for your daughter? It's actually, it's very intimate. But in this moment, I realize all of my credibility in the industry is actually pales in comparison to my credibility as a dad. Because I can confidently look at someone and say, I'd give up everything for Frankie to have a better future. I'm not speaking as a shill for an industry. I'm speaking as a dad who wants his daughter to live in a better world than he does. That's who I am speaking for. And people say, what do you want? What do you want for Frankie? I want my daughter to believe that she can solve problems. And I, in particular, want her to solve problems in front of herself. And I think so much of the fatalism and the cynicism and in some respect the nihilism that we face is from a generation that became performatively obsessed with problems that they will never see in person and underwhelmed by problems that they are intimately capable of fixing, immediately capable of fixing. And it percolates, it permeates to everything. And so I say to most people, look, if you want to build a better world, build it. There are a bunch of things that every single person can do by fixating on problems that you have solutions to. You learn a sense of agency that we stopped teaching kids a while ago when we sort of abdicated them from most responsibility. And this to me also is part and parcel with this idea of telling a better story, which is CEOs actually empowering people to do things that are good and fixing problems that they can actually see. And the last thing I'll say, this anti-AI rhetoric right now is particularly fascinating to me because AI is already having profoundly positive consequences on a lot of stuff that people are willing to hand wave that. Well, that's different. And I'm like, no, that's invisible technology. And it turns out actually the way that you win and the way that UiPath wins is when UiPath starts to automate a bunch of stuff that no one notices anymore. Yeah. And then we celebrate it. And then one day you turn around and you go, wow, yeah, I guess AI made our lives a whole lot better. Yeah, when we moved it to the background. Internet. When it stopped becoming a thing that you had to click around on, when it stopped becoming a thing that desperately wanted your attention, when it stopped becoming a thing that made a video of the president and Taylor Swift making out, when it started to become a thing that actually made the world better, then people go, oh yeah, I guess we do like that. Yeah, like autonomous roadways are going to be pretty awesome when 45,000 Americans don't die anymore. Yeah, you're right. Make the technology invisible and allow people to fix problems right in front of them. Those two things really compound.
It's good. Learned a lot in 7 months of parenthood. You've got the good.
Yeah. You've heard of Becky? Dr. Zack. There you go.
Nice. So flash forward 5 years. Who's been successful in the private sector and who hasn't? What are the things that you could point to that are the hallmarks of what made them successful? I'll start with you, Michael.
The thing that's interesting about UiPath is that it's easy for me to point to something like Apple Computer and be like, look at Apple. Look at the incredible emotional connection that people have to their products, whether you like them or you hate them. And some people, I don't know who's got an Android phone in their pocket versus an iPhone. But the incredible amount of energy and passion that can be generated by transformative, innovative technology is present even when you do gnarly sort of geeky things like orchestration and automation. And I actually love that. I love that I can find an audience of 1,000 people in Bengal or India who are dying to get in the room with the founder of our company because they built their careers on this technology. It excites them. I think that kind of connection, human connection to the technology and the innovation is actually an incredible sign of success. And it's why I know UiPath is successful. It's the same way I know that Apple is successful. At different scale, different size, different technology, but the fact that we can do that in enterprise and do that in gnarly geeky tech still is I love about what the mark of success. Like you probably have a point of view.
Yeah. Companies that are successful in 5 years, I think will share a set of pretty common characteristics. One, I think they will be far better at marketing. I think a lot of companies are going to do well because they actually rally their employees to believe in a much greater calling. Companies that tell stories about the ways in which they're improving the world will matter, whether it's performative or not, and I hope that it isn't. I think the third, and this one is kind of fun. I think the most effective private sector companies in 5 years will be the ones that have towed the line at the automation boundary. Every company has a right to automate an enormous amount of their work, and they actually have a go no further zone. And we don't know what it is. We actually have to discover it. And a lot of companies are going to discover it to their own detriment. They're going to discover that they automated way too much, and the market's going to terribly penalize them, be it because of a layoff or something like the loss of a customer experience. Discovering the automation boundary, both personally, collectively, is actually going to be one of these really powerful experiences over the next 20 years. And I will leave you with this quote. John Maynard Keynes in 1930 is traveling the world talking about how much better everything's going to get against a backdrop of abject despair. And he goes on this lecture circuit and people boo him off stage. They're like, you should read the room. People are dying of starvation outside. You should stop talking this way. He goes home and he writes this essay called The Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren, in which he writes, and I quote, I must now disembarrass myself to take flight into a future that I will certainly not live to see, one in which humans may have solved the economic problem and be faced with something more profound. The father of modern macroeconomics proposed in 1930 that at some point humans would clothe, care, feed for, house everyone, and then we would face our greatest struggle yet. And I actually think that so much of private sector success is going to come from individuals going through their own spiritual awakening.
Hope you're right.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here. AI is going to save the world. All kidding aside, though, really appreciate you guys being here. Zach, thank you so much.
Likewise.
Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be seeing you guys soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Path Forward. We'll see you on the journey ahead.